today's listener write-in, we'll be taking a letter from Giovanna. Giovanna writes in from Brazil. If you're new to this channel, please like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Dear Tess, I write with the help of Google Translate. For this reason, possible errors in translation may occur. Thinking that living with maladaptive daydreaming is also imagining oneself in imagined situations. It is difficult to think of oneself detached from these realities of one's own minds. My question is whether it is possible to one day see oneself in a non-fictional or romanticized way. Is it possible to build a personality based on reality and not on what we imagine? Hi Giovanna, thank you so much for writing in. Your question is really interesting. Your question feels almost like a philosophical question. And that question is, can we experience life without imagining ourselves in other scenarios? I'm not sure about that, and I'm also not sure if you would want that. Charles Duhigg, in his book The Power of Habit, he talks about how the best athletes are told by their coaches and are instructed by their coaches to imagine themselves as succeeding and winning. I think it's like every night before they go to bed or something. And those are the ones most likely to win and be successful in sports. There's such a positive relation between imagining yourself being successful and being successful. And in similar ways, sometimes someone imagines bad things happening and those things might actually happen. So I think the mind is very powerful. It allows us to kind of write our own destinies or destinations to certain degrees. The athletes who were successful in their fields didn't imagine themselves winning and then wake up, I don't know, at 10 a.m. and eat a hamburger. They imagined themselves training hard and winning, and they woke up early in the morning and they went off and trained and they lifted the weights they needed to lift and they ate the foods they needed to eat and they had the coaches they needed to have in order to be successful. I think that's where maladaptive daydreaming can lose some of the power of imagining yourself. So it's like there's nothing wrong with imagining yourself in certain scenarios. I think most of us do it. I think there are some people who can't actually visualize things in their heads, but I believe they're a smaller percentage. Most of us, many of us, can visualize scenarios or ourselves in our minds. That means we can kind of practice scenarios sometimes in our heads, or we can kind of set the stage for positive or negative things happening in our lives. I don't know if you would want to fully never imagine yourself again in a scenario, because I think you're taking away some of your power. Potentially. Is it possible to build a personality based on reality and not on what we imagine? I think maybe I'm a little confused about the question too, because it almost sounds like you're using your daydreaming to inform the person that you show up as in the world. I think for a lot of people who daydream excessively, there's a clear line between the daydreams and between reality. But yours almost seems to suggest that the daydreams cuts through that line so that reality is fed by the imagined personality of the self. You did say you were using Google Translate, so it could be something is getting a little lost in translation. So I'll try to offer my thoughts on that from a few different angles, and hopefully if there are some things lost in translation, I can touch upon one of them or some of them within what you're asking. I think the best way to experience the world and to mitigate maladaptive daydreaming is to exist more in the world. A lot of people have loneliness as a trigger for maladaptive daydreaming and isolation. And unfortunately, I think we're increasingly becoming a more isolated world. I think the best way to get to reality and around maladaptive daydreaming is to put yourself yourself in more situations of reality. And for a lot of us, that means being around people more. That might be really challenging if you're a more isolated person. And that might be really challenging if some of your activities that you enjoy feel more isolated. Sometimes when I'm in conversation with other writers or other artists, someone will say something like, oh, it's so isolating being a writer. I think a lot of writers actually feel like that. But for me, I don't feel like writing is an isolating activity as it is for me now in my life. I think when I was younger, it did feel isolating, but nowadays I'll write on public transportation, on an airplane, or I'll write with friends in the same shared space, or on a phone call, or in some scenario, or I share my writing at different venues. And that's all to say that an activity can be a one-person activity, but you can be in spaces with other people doing that one-person activity. So maybe one step of feeling more in reality is finding something you like to do and taking it outside the house. Maybe you like to read and you could take a book to a cafe and sit in a cafe. Maybe you won't talk to anyone that day at the cafe, or maybe you will. Maybe someone will say, oh, I like your blouse, or maybe someone will ask what you're reading, or maybe you'll see someone with a cool pair of boots and you'll say, hey, I like your boots, and you'll strike up a conversation. Or maybe the person behind the counter will have something nice to say. There's all kinds of different scenarios that happen in the world when you're in the world. And when you're only in your head, you're limited to whatever your head composes. So you say, is it possible to build a personality based on reality and not on what we imagine? I think I've gotten decisive about it. I would say yes, completely. And to do that, you need to be in reality more. You need to be in the world more. Because our personality, it does get a little philosophical, because then it's like, what is personality? Are we born with it? Do we develop it? But I personally think personality and how you interact with the world and other people can change. And I think one way that that changes is when you learn how to be in a different way with other people, for positive or negative. So some relationships can be really corrective. If you are historically someone who struggles with having conversations that are calm or safe feeling, having a conversation with someone who leads the way in making a safe conversation with you will have benefits. It will change how you see the world. It will change how you recognize your ability to communicate. You may realize, oh, it's not that I'm a bad communicator, it's that I was trying to communicate with people who yelled at me or called me names instead of sticking to the topic. So there's a lot of ways that we change in response to the world around us. And when you're only in your head, you're missing out on those ways. On one end, imagination can be so beneficial to how we show up in the world in certain ways. And there's that huge component of actually having to show up in the world and do things. I think I say this in almost every maladaptive daydreaming video, but if you want to daydream less, it really is creating a reality you enjoy more. So maybe an exercise you could try, take out a piece of paper and spend 10-15 minutes writing down, what does a beautiful reality look like to me? Be so explicit, get as detailed as you can, talk about your relationships, what kind of job you would do, pull things from your daydreams, what does that look like? Where are you living? And then find different ways from what you write down of how to engage that in reality. When I was younger, I wanted to have lots of dramatic clothes that were fun. And so over the years, when I travel, I like to find unique pieces of clothes. So I bought this blouse at one of my favorite little shops. I mean, it's in the States, it's Anthropologie, but it took some time to find those things that lended toward the image of myself I saw. The image of myself was that I wore kind of the quirky and whimsical and beautiful clothes that made me feel more alive and made me feel more myself, and that were lacy or frilly or had bows on them. So sometimes it takes a long time or a while to build up to the reality of our daydreams, but there are small steps you can take. I mean, in this case, it was me just looking over the years and buying clothes when I could that resonated with my heart or my imagination of what is beautiful. In other ways, if you imagine yourself in a romanticized way as being someone who lights candles at home and reads by candlelight, then instead of just imagining yourself do that, get a candle and get a book and do that. Put on some like soft jazz, set the mood for yourself for like a beautiful evening. You talk about living in a non-fictional or non-romanticized way, but I don't think there's anything wrong with making your life more romantic as opposed to decreasing that kind of whimsy in your reality. I would say take all the fun and take all the whimsy from your daydreams and see where you can put that in reality. And I think that would also just make reality more enticing to you. If your reality becomes more beautiful than your daydreams, or more exciting, or more whatever you want it to be than your daydreams, then you're naturally gonna daydream less because it's not providing the same benefits. In that case, reality is winning. And that's kind of what I hope for everyone who has questions on maladaptive daydreaming or who want to decrease their daydreams. I really hope that everyone is able to just like increase the beauty of their lives and make the reality of their lives way more enticing than maladaptively daydreaming. So I hope I answered your question. Hopefully I didn't get lost in Google Translate. Thank you so much for writing in, Giovanna. For anyone who would like to support this channel, please join the Patreon. I post a book a month, a book recommendation of the month, a journal exercise of the month, a well-being tip of the month, and an early release video. And please, please, please let us know if you have any responses to Giovanna's question. I think it's always lovely when other people weigh in. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you all next time. Take care.